Let's look at problem B. In problem B, again, we're going to use our binomial theorem because we have something raised to the 5th power. However, our variables are a little bit different this time because we have an A and then, we've got a negative B. So you have to be careful if you have a negative here that you have to bring the negative along with you, and it gets raised to the exponent that you're using for each term as well. So, first piece, remember we start with our highest amount on our first variable, which is that A. We'll start out with an A to the 5th because we're raised to the 5th here. And then we'll take our second variable, the negative B, and we won't have any of those, so it'll be raised to the 0. Then our next term, let's see. So we have the 8. So for this first term, we had the A to the 5th. And we had the B to the 0, which means there weren't any B's. So we'll just have the A to the 5th. On the second term, we'll work our way down with our A's. We'll have an A to the 4th, but we'll have our negative B, or other variable, to now the first power. Because the negative B is raised only to the first power, our next term will be a negative. We'll have our A to the 4th in there, though, and our B, which was to the first power, but we just moved the negative out in front from the negative B. Now look at the next term. Again, working our A's downward. We had a 4th, now we're going to be at a 3rd. Our next term has the negative B's working our way up. We went from 1 to now we've got 2. What happens when you square a negative? It turns back into a positive, and it will stay as a B squared. Okay, continuing along, we're working our A's down. So we had A to the 3rd. Now we're going to be at A squared. And our negative B's are working their way up. We were at negative B squared. Now we're at negative B cubed. What happens when you cube a negative? It stays negative. We'll move the negative out in front, and it will stay as a B cubed. Next term, we're again still working our A's down. We were at 2 A's. Now we're down to 1. And our negative B's are working their way up. We were at cubed. Now our negative B is to the 4th. What happens when you raise a negative to the 4th power? Well, it stays as to the 4th power and it turns into a positive. So we'll have a plus out in front of that term. Last term, we're working our A's downward. So now we had 1 A, now we're down to none. That means there won't be any A's listed. And our negative B was working its way up. We were at 4, and now we're at negative B to the 5th. Because the B to the 5th, the negative B to the 5th is raised to an odd power, it will stay negative. Now the question is, what are all the coefficients? That means you need to go back and do all the combinations. Remember, our power was 5. So your first combination you'd start out with is 5 on top, 0 on the bottom, which will give you 1 as your first coefficient. Your next combination for your next term would be a 5 on top and a 1 on the bottom. Using your calculator, that would get you a 5 as your coefficient. Your next one would be 5 on top, working your way up to 2 on the bottom, which would give you a 10 as your coefficient. Next combination would be a 5 on top, 3 on the bottom, using your calculator, which would give you again a 10. Next combination would be 5 on top, 4 on the bottom. Using your calculator would get you a 5 again. And combination of 5 and 5 would get you a 1 for your last coefficient, and you are done. So notice, if your second variable has a negative, what ends up happening to your signs is you end up with an alternating sign. If it is looking at odd powers. Whenever you have an odd power on a negative, it stays negative. Whenever you had an even, it turned into a positive. So odd powers on negatives stayed negative. Even powers on negatives turned back into a positive. And our final answer ended up being this A to the 5th minus 5a to the fourth b plus 10a to the third b squared minus 10a squared b to the third plus 5a b to the fourth minus b to the fifth. That's our final answer if you were to rewrite what we came up with without those ones written out.